Hi, this is Paul Slatkus, Peace Day Party and Good News Planet. I'm speaking to Warren Haig. Hi, Warren. How are you?
Hi, Paul. How are you? Did you have a great Labor Day?
I did have a great Labor Day. I worked through the Labor Day because we're working on world peace, and it's really at this moment with our upcoming event on September 20th in San Jose and September 21st here in New York and other places in the world. We are busy bees, and I have to out front thank Warren Haig because he helped us do San Jose. He found San Jose's event because he really is a good Samaritan, a man doing phenomenal work. He's overseeing, he's the national supervisor of Keep the Spirit of 45 Alive. I met him through a good buddy, Bobby Basacci, who's been a good friend and a man who was in the service and goes out and is always thinking of others as well. Like Warren. Warren has a website, spiritofforty-five.org, and next year is the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and Warren is giving his all to give recognition to that, and he started this year in Times Square, and he's a good buddy. So, hi, Warren. How are you? Sorry for the long-winded...
Hi, Paul. I was listening to you. It was interesting how it all kind of fell together. I mean, you labored, no pun intended, over the holidays on probably the most intractable, most difficult, but most worthy of causes, which of course is peace. And you mentioned that you and I got together through this Spirit of 45, which is the spirit of 1945, which was a reminder that there was a time when peace was achieved and there was an enormous amount of idealism. It's not just an ephemeral or a wishful thought that there might be peace. World War II had ended. The good guys had won. The desperate destruction was over. And this country, which we like to think is the best of what humanity has to offer, and from time to time can convey that sort of idealism in acts, actually set about the work of the good peace and the kinds of institutions that literally began to be formed in the immediate wake of the end of World War II. You can almost say that August 14th, 1945 was International Peace Day. The conquering hero, the country that had ultimately been the decisive factor in that terrible war with America, that it chose to return all the conquered lands. It welcomed home those men that had been asked to do these incredibly horrific things in the name of freedom and preservation of democracy in the world, and gave them the things like the GI Bill and others to find a way for them to find their way back home into a civilian society. The work to rebuild the destruction, obviously with its allies, but most importantly, how they tried to assure a better future for their children, their children's children, both their friend and their former enemy alike. It was unprecedented in the history of the world. And if America ever feels there's a moment when it really deserves some, maybe a resurgence of a sense that they are special, that the world is a better place, it is a more peaceful opportunity for the rest of humanity because America exists, there's no better opportunity to celebrate that than August 14th, 1945, when the greatest generation showed why we indeed refer to them as the greatest generation.
Let me ask you, Warren, how did you get involved with this outreach?
Well, it's very interesting. I began I used to be at a place called Stanford Research, SRI, out in Menlo Park, California, and we were a big think tank and did a lot of consulting work with all kinds of folks. And if you have a mouse on your computer, it's because it was invented at SRI, a lot of technology. But I was drawn into a project where I was being asked, how would kids define the future of the digital age? It was quite a challenge. I mean, we were into a lot of issues, but these were social issues. And NASA wanted some answers because they had always thought of themselves as a leader in what the next biggest thing would be in digital communication. So I spent some time with the young people, and I ended up working with a lot of kids who were terminally ill, kids that were not going to see the real future of the digital age, but were very savvy about the power of technology and how, and wanted to make an impact. They didn't want to play video games. They wanted to do something worthwhile. They wanted to take on education and public health and aging and all these incredible issues that were not actually going to play out in their lifetimes because they weren't going to have those stories. But they were very eager to be remembered as having had some impact on that. And I was drawn into that, and then through them I really learned I think what you would call the formula for courage, and that's in these kids' lives, it was merely not running away from reality. It's standing strong and learning to cope with it. that was a great lesson. And one of the projects they developed was trying to find ways to connect with people who had had traumatic experiences or difficulties in life that they were facing, and they worked with breast cancer survivors and stroke survivors and people who had lost a loved one in something we called intergenerational digital storytelling. We had a lot of the Silicon Valley companies helping us out, and kids were making little mini movies, and many of which you can still find on the internet. Thousands of these little movies were created, short little quick time movies about courage and about inspiration. And then they discovered that there are these older people that had all lived through some very difficult times. Growing up in the Great Depression, got a toothbrush for Christmas. Dad had been out of work for 3 years. Suddenly Pearl Harbor, they're thrust onto the world stage. They've got to go out into the world and save civilization. They come home. What are they going to do? There's all this uncharted territory, and they put together the United Nations. They put together all these institutions to try to assure this better future. And these kids were incredibly inspired by that and almost were sort of channeling or living through these people. And that was where I got my first taste of the greatest generation. And, of course, like most baby boomers, I turned around and discovered I had them in my own family. My father had been in the Navy in World War II. He lost his little brother at Okinawa in the last battle. My mother had been a Rosie. And then by a quirk of fate, I married a woman whose family was on the other side of this equation. He was a man who was her father was taken prisoner at Iwo Jima. So it became very personal about what 1945 represented as a turning point in people's lives and in their families' lives. And we suddenly realized, with a lot of other folks, actors like Ernie Borgnine, who'd served 10 years in the Navy and was very involved in this sort of thing, said there really ought to be a day. And so they lobbied Congress, and in 2010, the United States Congress unanimously, hard to believe, but unanimously voted for a Spirit of 45 Day to be observed the second weekend or second Sunday of every August, which aligns pretty much with August 14th, 1945. And that was in 2010. Several thousand people showed up in Times Square, and we moved a 26-foot replica of the kiss, the famous Times Square kiss with the sailor kissing the nurse, into Times Square, and we had a real big send-off. And since then, it's moved out across the United States. More than 500 communities this year were celebrating or commemorating the day. And then next year, of course, being the 70th anniversary, represents an opportunity for the whole country and several other foreign or offshore communities to hold hands and say, hey, well, it was a great moment for the world, and let's not forget the terror and the horror of war when that's the solution to problems, and let's look at a generation of people that strove so hard to make a lasting and durable peace in the world. Let's celebrate their memory, and let's give it one more try. And so that's what Spirit 45 Day is all about. For me, it's a larger story. You don't have to go all the way back to 1776 and a bunch of white guys in white wigs in a room in Philadelphia talking about an ideal or an idea of a nation. Is all these great values and all these great commitments to humanity and democratic institutions. You don't have to go far back. You need to look back to when it was really thrown into doubt and the whole nation put down all its petty differences and found a way to come together and make those ideals real, not only for America, but for the world. So that's my case, and I'm sticking to it, at least.
As well as you should, and I'm here to share it as you continue on with it, whenever you want to. I'm going to consider this part, it's in essence part 2, since we filmed a lot of your event in Times Square this year. We put up Chancellor Bruce Hellman. We interviewed the nice couple that did do that kiss. We have that show.
Weren't they remarkable? I mean, talk about examples of the generation. That lady that you interviewed, who was 91 years old, who's winning marathons. She's a concertinist running marathons. Who was a cancer survivor, and she's still out there winning best in class at 91, running. I mean, that's the spirit. Dr. Hillman driving that motorcycle from Virginia to Alaska at the age of 88. I just hope that when I'm their age, I'll have that same sort of quality of character and self-motivation to be able to do those kinds of things.
There you go. They're at the prime of their life. They're prime of lifers. There's no doubt about it. And that's all good. And we're going to put some of these stories on the Prime of Lifers website on Facebook as well as our own. So we got a lot of good things going on. I want to ask you one last question just now, and then we'll get into more at a later moment. What's peace for you, Warren?
Oh, peace is the hardest work there is and the most rewarding of efforts. Peace is hope more than anything else, an opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity, and it's without it, so many other opportunities basically cease to exist. Because war is so destructive, violence is so counterproductive, and peace, ultimately, like truth, it does win out. But we don't make it easier when we when we abandon what I believe is the core essence of it, which is hope that tomorrow will be a better day, and having the wherewithal and the opportunity to try to make that happen. And I think that's, for me, the definition of peace.
Warren, thanks so much for sharing with us. Keep the spirit of 45 alive, and we're really honored to have met you and to build our relationship for a long term and do some good for the world. So thank you very much, Warren, for sharing with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, your commitment to this and trying to remind people that good news is certainly preferable to the alternative, but that it takes some effort and it takes constant application to ensure that there is some good news to triumph over all the more negative noise that unfortunately is a big part of life these days.
Yeah. We're working on it. The world's working on it. That's the good news. All
yes,
right,
indeed.
Warren, thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you.